One morning, when Gregor Samsa woke from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed, in his bed, into a horrible vermin. He lay on his armor-like back, and if he lifted his head a little, he could see his brown belly slightly domed and divided by arches into stiff sections. The bedding was hardly able to cover it, and seemed ready to slide off any moment. His many legs, pitifully thin compared with the size of the rest of him, waved about helplessly as he looked. This is a fairly well-known opening line. In recent years, I'd say it's reached a point that it's up there with Best of Times, Worst of Times, or Marley Was Dead to begin with. These are the opening lines of the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. And as I read it this year for the first time, what struck me most was not how arbitrary the tragedy was. It's never explained how Gregor Samsa transformed into this bug that he became. And that is the point that some people like to focus on. But what I saw was how his treatment changed. We learn in the course of the story that this was a man who supported his entire family out of a sense of duty and a sense of love. He had plans for how he was going to continue to help his family and how he was going to help them even more in the future, and all of that was torn apart from him. And he was left unable to be the provider he had been. And when circumstance and weird, strange luck reduced his capabilities, what I saw was a man who lost his ability to speak to those he loved. And in response, those he loved questioned whether he was even still in there at all. A man who could no longer work to provide for his family, and when it was their turn to provide from him, they resented the obligation. The tragedy and the horror of the metamorphosis isn't even so much in the bug itself. There's the body horror of the body he finds himself in, but the true horror is this realization that those he loved did not love him enough to continue to care for him, as his body betrayed him. What I saw in Metamorphosis was a story of infirmity. That when the provider became the one who needed provision, and when he became disfigured and unpleasant to look at, and when he became a burden, they resented him, they locked him away, and in the end, they breathed a guilty sigh of relief when he was finally dead, and they finally had no further obligation to him. The horror of Metamorphosis is tragedy.